What if Sean Connery wasn't the suave gentleman he portrayed in the James Bond films?
Bond. James Bond.
If his lovers, co-stars, and colleagues are to be believed, the truth is much worse. Sources suggest he was a nightmare on set, his neighbors thought of him as a litigious jerk, and he condoned violence towards women.
You think it's good to slap a woman?
I think it's absolutely right.
In fact, it may have been his most popular role as 007 that turned him into a monster. In this video, we'll examine the evidence surrounding the private and professional life of Sean Connery. Stay tuned as we dig into the flaws of the legendary Scotsman and reveal the real reason he quit James Bond at the peak of his success. With his role as James Bond and subsequent title of Sexiest Man Alive, Sean Connery was the epitome of cool for his entire career. That's why so many people were confused when Saturday Night Live portrayed Sean Connery as a foul-mouthed jerk during their original Celebrity Jeopardy sketch.
This is the sound a doggy makes. Mr. Connery.
Moo.
No.
Well, that's the sound your mother made last night.
Let's see what you wagered. Suck it, Trebek.
A Reddit user posed the question whether the feud with Alex Trebek was based on anything factual, and why Connery was portrayed as such a jerk in the sketch. A few noteworthy stories were shared, with one user claiming, quote, "Sean Connery was notoriously a dick. He had questionable clauses in his contracts, including you're only allowed 2 takes, and you're not allowed to say cut when he's getting close to the female co-stars. He decides when the scene is done." Another user referenced Michael Caine, a good friend of Sean Connery's. Quote, "Caine would talk about Connery's bad temper. He said in particular it could flare up on the golf course. Michael said he'd witnessed Sean bullying a caddy and launching into tirades when things didn't go his way." Interestingly, Connery himself addressed his temper in a 1987 interview with Barbara Walters, and whether it ever led him to physical altercations.
I have a very violent temper, I have, and I wouldn't want to start hitting. But I'm also quite strong.
And with the highly publicized life that Connery led, it's not difficult to find instances of him acting less than friendly to those around him, such as this interview filmed at the premiere of The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen in 2004.
You question me why I wasn't here? I've been all over the world working my ass off, and you've done nothing. I'm underwriting you. Do you know that? Okay, how do you feel now?
I feel awful, but how does it feel to be here? Does it feel good to be here?
It feels wonderful until I start to talk to you.
While all these anecdotes show that Sean Connery has a darker side, the truth about the SNL parody might be more innocent. Darrell Hammond, the comedian who played Connery in the hit sketch, spoke to Rolling Stone about how they decided on including the Sean Connery character. He said, quote, "I came up with, I think, the most unlikely character of all, which I was sure would be my biggest flop and failure, and that's Sean Connery. I remember thinking to myself, they're not going to understand this premise. It makes no sense that Sean Connery doesn't know answers on Jeopardy. It makes no sense that Sean Connery hates Alex Trebek, and yet it's easily the most popular thing I've ever done." So it turns out the SNL sketch was completely unrelated to Sean Connery's off-screen persona, but it might still be surprisingly accurate. No one makes it through Hollywood unscathed, and even Sean Connery himself confessed to making a few enemies when he won his Oscar in 1988.
Good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, and a few enemies.
But who are these enemies? Well, he notably clashed with producers on numerous movie sets, starting with the James Bond films. In a 1967 interview, he was asked if he had gratitude for the producers for putting the films together, or whether he would have changed anything.
Well, it's a very touchy spot with me because I have discovered a sort of latent hatred for injustice, and I feel that it's been going on for such a long time, particularly with producers, that there is a lot of freeloading goes on. You know, a period of the making of film can be anything up to 7-8 months. So in all that time, they can be have all their accommodation paid, their chauffeur-driven cars, all their restaurant bills signed off against the company, and they do live like gangsters.
Like gangsters?
Like gangsters.
Well,
Their freeloading might just be one of several complaints against Bond film producers that eventually drove him to quit the series, not once but twice. Although the first 4 movies seemingly went smoothly, tensions ran high when production of the 5th Bond film, You Only Live Twice, began. Sean Connery became conflicted with the character of James Bond, feeling that the character had stalled out and failed to develop any further over the series. He developed fears of being typecast as 007.
Oh, the things I do for England.
As they began principal photography for You Only Live Twice, Connery's international superstardom started becoming an issue. He had repeated encounters with a stalker and an incident where Japanese photographers recorded him in a public bathroom. With the risks of typecasting and his decreasing levels of privacy, Connery felt that he was not being properly compensated for the role of James Bond. For You Only Live Twice, he was being paid $750,000 plus 25% of merchandising profits. He demanded more, and producers refused, causing him to step away from the role for good.
As far as I'm concerned, I finished with the James Bond.
you're not going to do any more movies as James Bond?
No, I've stated my terms that I would take £1 million tax-free to do another one.
£1 million tax-free?
Yes.
Is there that much money in the United Kingdom?
Yes, there is.
I take it you put those terms having in mind that nobody was going to come up with it.
Yes, certainly. I don't think anybody would pay that amount.
Although he was able to finish production of You Only Live Twice, reports suggest that he couldn't even be on set at the same time as producer Albert Broccoli because he hated him so much. Evidently, Connery hated his other producer, Harry Saltzman, just as much. While playing cards, Connery received the news that Saltzman suffered a stroke and became paralyzed down one side of his body. His response, quote, "Good, I hope he's paralyzed down the other side tomorrow." As hard as this is to believe, Connery doubled down on it when he later confirmed that this interaction was indeed true. So Connery confidently stepped away from the James Bond role after his 5th film. In his absence, George Lazenby took over the role as James Bond for 1969's On Her Majesty's Secret Service. For numerous reasons of his own, Lazenby stepped down from the role before the film even released, leaving the studios scrambling for a replacement for the series' 6th entry. To everyone's surprise, Connery returned as Bond one last time, thanks to a salary offer of $1.25 million. Still, he was so fed up with the series at this point that he revealed, quote, "I have always hated that damned James Bond. I'd like to kill him." He then proceeded to donate his entire salary from 1971's Diamonds Are Forever to the Scottish International Educational Trust, which he co-founded. After this, he once again left the series, this time for good.
Hi, I'm Plenty.
But of course you are.
He turned down a $5 million salary for a new Bond film and would never appear as James Bond again. Even with James Bond behind him, his troubles with producers had just begun. But that's not to say he wasn't successful after James Bond, quite the opposite. The world still loved Sean Connery. He earned his first and only Oscar in 1988 for Best Supporting Actor after his role in The Untouchables.
Sean Connery in The Untouchables.
He was so in demand during this time, he earned himself a small uncredited appearance as King Richard in 1991's Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. For just 2 days on set, very little dialogue, and a total of less than 2 minutes of screen time,
Unless I'm allowed to give the bride away.
he took home a paycheck of $250,000. Unfortunately, this path of success led him to signing on to 2003's The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, a movie that would send him into retirement.
The game is on.
The upcoming League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was a pseudo-superhero film, a movie that Sean Connery felt he had to be a part of after passing on huge roles in previous years. He had recently declined offers to play Morpheus in The Matrix, Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, and Dumbledore in the Harry Potter series. Connery couldn't let another potential hit slip through his hands. So what went wrong? For starters, Connery earned a $17 million salary for his role in the film. Producers say this prevented them from hiring any other big names to join the cast, as the budget was already spread thin. With the budget running out, production teams hit a new obstacle when inclement weather destroyed some of the sets. Director Stephen Norrington begged to delay the release of the film, and the studio refused. Still, Norrington did what he could to salvage the production of the film with what they had, which included relocating the production of the film and rescheduling many shoots. Connery was reportedly furious with the production issues, calling Norrington insane and even saying, quote, "I want to punch you in the face." He never appeared in a film again, and later confessed it was indeed his experience on this film set that made him quit for good. He said, quote, "It was a nightmare. I get fed up dealing with idiots," which is a sentiment he echoed throughout his career.
I like working with pros, and I can't stand people who are less than enthusiastic.
Stupid. I hate stupidity more than anything.
Connery wasn't afraid to make a few enemies out of his Hollywood colleagues, and the same can be said about the people in his personal life. During an infamous interview with Playboy in 1965, he made a comment that angered at least half the population. Quote, "I don't think there's anything particularly wrong about hitting a woman, although I don't recommend doing it in the same way that you'd hit a man. An open-handed slap is justified if all other alternatives fail." Over 20 years later, in a 1987 interview, Barbara Walters gave him a chance to correct his stance.
You think it's good to slap a woman?
No, I don't think it's good. I
think it's bad?
I don't think it's that bad. I think that it depends entirely on the circumstances and if it merits it.
What would merit it?
Well, if you have tried everything else, then I think it's absolutely right.
To give her a good slap?
Yeah, absolutely.
While he insisted in the same interview that he never hit his wives, they had a different experience. His first wife was Diane Cilento, who was married to Italian writer Andrew Volpi when they met and was pregnant with his child. Connery left his girlfriend for Cilento, and the two married in 1962, but it was doomed from the start. Cilento was a burgeoning actress at the time and more famous than Connery, considering that none of the Bond films were released yet. Still, Connery insisted that she give up her career to take care of the children. It wasn't long until Connery made his own riches through the James Bond films, but he allegedly refused to pay anything towards their housekeeping.
Welcome to hell, Blofeld.
Not long after, he was rumored to have had an affair with actress Sue Lloyd, and rumors swirled after he developed public relationships with Shelley Winters and his Thunderball co-star Claudine Auger. Sylvia Miles also confessed to sharing a bed with Connery in the very home that his wife and children lived in. While filming for 1965's The Hill, Cilento and Connery attended a wedding where Diane allegedly danced with numerous male partners and partied until the early hours. Connery, who was exhausted from a long day of filming, returned to the room and waited for her. Cilento claims when she returned to her room, it was dark and she was hit in the face and fell to the ground. Then she was hit a second time as she found shelter in her bathroom and locked the door, where she stayed for the remainder of the night. Connery denies the allegations that he attacked her. A few years later, in 1970, Connery attended a golf tournament where he met his future wife, Micheline Roquebrune. At the time, she was married and had 3 children already. While she spoke no English and was a native French speaker, Sean Connery spent his week wooing her. Weeks later, he called her to tell her he was in love with her. Connery would divorce Cilento in 1974 and subsequently marry Micheline Roquebrune in 1975. To keep an eye on him, she followed him around the world to various film sets to ensure he wasn't tempted by his female co-stars. Of course, that wouldn't be enough to stop him. Connery met singer Lindsay DePaul at a party in 1989 and asked her for her phone number despite Micheline sitting right next to him. They started an affair in 1993 that lasted several months until he abruptly stopped contacting her. In 1996, Connery was caught kissing his makeup artist Nina Kraft, who was working on The Rock with him. A year later, Helle Byrne confessed that she shared an 11-month affair with Connery. For the 1999 film Entrapment, Connery starred alongside Catherine Zeta-Jones. He insisted that the script was rewritten so that there would be romantic scenes between Connery and the leading lady.
Has there ever been anyone you couldn't seduce?
No.
He was 68 at the time, while Catherine Zeta-Jones was 28 years old. While Connery seemingly cheated on his wives at every opportunity, Micheline says she knew what she was getting into. She would later say, quote, "When I met Sean, I knew I was taking on the whole package. Everyone wants him, and I have to accept and understand that." After bad-mouthing producers, cheating on his wives, and even condoning violence towards women, you might think that the list of people Sean Connery has wronged is drawing to a close. However, even his neighbors had bad things to say about him. Between 2001 and 2007, Connery was renovating his 6-story townhouse in New York. His neighbor, Dr. Burton Sultan, filed a dispute that his renovations, quote, ruined their furniture and filled their apartment with noxious fumes. Furthermore, they, quote, injured family members, including a daughter and a grandson. Sultan even claimed that Connery was, quote, a bully who ignores norms of neighborliness and decency. He sued Sean Connery for $30 million over the damages. Connery filed 6 lawsuits against him in return, at which point the judge dismissed most of the claims from both sides and ordered they stop filing lawsuits and turn to mediation instead. While the outcome of these lawsuits are not publicly known, one thing is clear. Sean Connery, despite his irrevocably cool legacy as James Bond, had a personal life clouded with conflict and controversy. Do you think these stories confirm the truth, or is there more to Sean Connery that we didn't see? Let us know in the comments section below.